Columbia and its affiliated stations present a special broadcast for Wednesday, October 16th, 1946, a day that will long be remembered at Nuremberg and throughout the world. The Empty Noose.
Göring, Ribbentrop, Keitel, Kaltenbrunner, Rosenberg, Frank, Frick, Saukel, Jodl, Streicher, and Seyss-Inquart. You should have seen them die. Seen all but one who arranged it by his own schedule. Walk in the early morning of a gray, cold day while most of Europe slept. Seen them hanged one by one in the gymnasium under the electric light. There was one gone, and the ghastly 10 walked to where the hangman waited. Like those who watched, he knew there was no payment large enough for what they had done. This was not a reckoning. This was the token answer, no more than that, of the United People of America, of Britain, France, and Russia, to those who had made a mockery of human decency, a charnel house of human culture, a spittoon of human feelings. What we were doing we felt, for each of us sprung the traps, was very little against what they had done. Yet it was something. It meant something. There were 11 of them, their crimes in duplicate and triplicate. Looking back over the pattern of the darkness and ruin that was their handiwork, there are 5 to focus upon, 5 who sum it up and show it whole. Who is this one, the first who died? Flabby in blue pajamas, the fragments of glass still in his mouth, cheating again. This time the 13 steps. He died for committing the crime of aggressive war, for committing criminal acts in the conduct of war, and for crimes against humanity. With Hitler, he was the planner, the inciter, the leader. He was a man of station who did not soil his hands with blood. He was expert at using lesser murderers as his tools. He can be remembered as the patron of the ballet. He can be remembered as the collector of fine paintings. He can be remembered with medals and natty uniforms. He can be remembered. For his record, said the verdict, is unique in its enormity. Hermann Wilhelm Göring. You may remember an earlier Göring, the vandal, the incendiary. That was the start of the conspiracy 13 years ago, the burning of the Reichstag. It is well to remember beginnings, starting points. What did you think then, when the story broke that the communists had set fire to the Reichstag? That was the Nazi story. It wasn't true, but truth was already a casualty. There are Germans who remember that morning, the morning after the fire.
I was in the ball bearing plant in Stuttgart then. A small place, 60 men. We were talking about it when the whistle blew. We lined up in the square, and the owner came to speak. He said the Reds had burned the Reichstag. Herr Hitler, the new chancellor, said it was a plot of the Reds and the unions for revolution. He asked how many had their union cards with them. You can tear them up, said the boss. From now on, I run the plant, I alone. Some tore up their cards, and after a while, we went back to work, some of us joking. If the little Austrian corporal wanted us to tear up our cards, we'd tear them up. The union was strong. We laughed and went back to work.
As the unions died, so died their laughter, as Göring ran the show. In the hysteria created by the fire, the communists were outlawed. In the next breath, unions were declared illegal. All officials arrested, all funds confiscated. The opposition was put in concentration camps. The Nazis met a phantom revolution with a real one. Trade unions were dead in Germany. Step one in the Nazi conspiracy to wage aggressive war was done. Shackle labor first, said Göring. 6 million union men were marched into the labor front, and the Führer principle was established in all factories. The battle against the working class was won before the working class knew it was a war. Labor was chained behind the chariot of aggression. And now the great conspiracy could roll. It rolled over Austria, over Poland, Belgium, France, over Europe. But first, it rolled over the bodies of the German working men. The octopus that step by step squeezed life from the small businessman, the farmer, the professional, the secretaries of a continent, first ground into bondage the miners, steel workers, truck drivers, mechanics of Germany. This is what we condemned. This prelude to aggression with the death of Hermann Göring.
Did we finish it? This technique of fear and violence and oppression when Göring died? Did we get rid of it all, everywhere?
The next dead Nazi to the right of Göring was an intellectual. His proudest title was Herr Doktor. Dr. Alfred Rosenberg, founder of the Nazi Party, charter member, philosopher. His were the words, the poems, the choruses that sang of Aryan supremacy. What he did can be understood, perhaps, by listening to a letter dated 1936.
Liebe Emma, I lost the order yesterday that would have been good for 2,000 marks at least, and lost it to whom? A Czech. Why? Why do I work to sell my product, surely as good as any shoe in Europe, to be undersold and cheated by a fraudulent Czech? I was dressing tonight before the mirror when I looked at myself. Of course you know all this, but I am telling you the way it happened. I am 6 feet 1/2 inch, blonde. I have blue eyes, and yet a runt wins over me. They are smaller than I, all of them, weaker than I, darker than I. Yet, because their brains are cunning, they win out. And you, my doll, will spend the next winter with your old overcoat, while they will have new furs. Yes, it is so clear what we can do, Emma. I feel strong tonight, my doll. We shall do it, Liebchen, under our glorious new banners. Thinking of you always, my doll, my love, Erich.
The heat from the Reichstag fire flushed them. They grew bold, these Erics, and guided by their master, Herr Dr. Rosenberg, they became the new Atlas, gods of the North, blonde gods sweeping the world with a cleansing sword. When the life of Jesus placed God above Hitler and the Sermon on the Mount above Mein Kampf, they tore down the cross of mercy and put their twisted cross in its place. They shattered the stained glass windows and made a science of annihilation. How much pain could a Pole, say, stand before he died? How often could a Russian child be bled before she died? 7 times? 9? A dozen? And the writings, the painting, the poetry and sculpture of these apes. They made a urinal of the Greek Orthodox Church in Poltava. In Poland one day, their tanks were stopped by a mud patch. So they paved that road with Bibles from the Warsaw Library. The manuscripts of Leo Tolstoy and Tchaikovsky they used to wipe their shoes. The doctor was a writer, a thinker. He never fired a pistol. He never so much as slapped a Jew in his life. From this philosopher's chair came the words that bred violence, the myth that preached aggression.
Is it dead, this idea that one man's better than another because he's Aryan or white, or is that dead? Or is the idea still around?
The body swinging next is that of Julius Streicher, the anti-Semite, hung for crimes against humanity, hung for his part in the murder of 6 million Jews. He was the editor, just that, the editor of Der Stürmer. He said at the trial, "But I am just an editor." As Rosenberg was just a philosopher and Keitel just a soldier, Streicher was just an editor. In the beginning, when Der Stürmer first appeared, it attracted a lot of attention. There was one reader, for example, a clerk in a haberdashery in Frankfurt.
I got the copy this morning. First time I ever saw it. You know, it's juicy. It's got the best pictures. Girls and cartoons. You know, the Jews with a beard and long noses, they're okay, but those jokes. There's one in this issue, Lulu. There was this woman, married, see? But her husband wasn't home much. So one morning there was this knocking on the door, and she wasn't wearing much, but she figured she'd see who was at the door anyhow. So guess who it was?
Then there was the one about the Jew in Garmisch on Passover night, who caught a little Aryan girl and killed her and made a cake out of her blood. Remember that one? That was a hot one, too. Remember Warsaw? That was really something, wasn't it? On the front page of Der Stürmer, Streicher wrote it. Some story. Herr Streicher, for this, for your pornography, for your incitations, your lewdness, for setting an army against a defenseless people whose only crime was having been born Jewish, for this you were hanged. It is a fault of decency and justice that it does not know properly how to kill the body of Julius Streicher. But like the others, you are dead. In your last words, Julius Streicher, Heil Hitler.
Is the idea dead, too? Is it all finished because they strung up Streicher? Or have you seen the words on the walls of buildings?
Ernst Kaltenbrunner hangs beside Julius Streicher. Ernst Kaltenbrunner is dead, the chief of the security police, the head of the Gestapo. The concentration camp man is dead beside the anti-Semite. With Himmler, he raised terror to the level of science. In his defense, he said he was a policeman, the guardian of the law, of private property, and the state. In the beginning, early, he developed the technique of night and fog and suddenness. It worked wonders.
They came in the night. It was 2:30, 2:45. They took Papa, and that was all. They told me nothing. Why? Where was he going? What had he done? Nothing.
Frida, your father was taken for questioning. Perhaps it was the income tax or his license at the store. Maybe he forgot to renew it.
No.
Are we such children that we listen to old wives' tales? What was the story last week? Young Brooker, they put live coals under his armpits. You believe that?
Oh.
This is the German Reich. This is 1936. Is this the Middle Ages? Have we a Spanish Inquisition? No, my dear. Rest. Rest, and in the morning you will see.
In the morning, I went to the Gestapo. They slapped me in the face. I never saw Papa again. An urn containing his ashes came a month later. There was a funeral charge of 5 marks.
The beginnings were quiet, but the business of death grew noisy. First, the rooms were made soundproof. Then the camps were removed from the city so the shrieks of the dying would not disturb the peace. The prisoners of war were brought into the special hospitals. for special injections of bacteria. Advanced techniques in chemical and biological warfare were first tried out on prisoners of war. Before the bodies were burned, the teeth must be inspected, all gold and silver fillings removed and forwarded to warehouse D. The hair of women should be cut off before disposing of the bodies in lime pits. The hair made excellent stuffing for mattresses. The commandant's wife asked that the skin of all tattooed men be removed before the bodies are disposed of. Her lampshade of human skin had attracted a lot of attention, and she was anxious to supply her friends with similar lampshades. In pulverizing human bones, it was important to separate the bones of the skull from the body bones. The former produced the highest grade fertilizer for cabbages, potatoes, radishes, and carrots. Then there was Herr Kaltenbrunner's height machine. Killing prisoners by bullets was both wasteful and inaccurate, the order read. The height machine was recommended. A solid bar of iron was lowered over the prisoner's head. He was told his measurements were being taken. By a simple snap release, a sharp pin in the bar can be made to penetrate the skull. So, simultaneous action by height machines could kill 200 in 4 minutes at a cost of 60 pfennig. For how many were you hanged, Ernst Kaltenbrunner? For the millions you murdered, or just the Belgian child who, because he asked a question of your men, was crucified against the barn behind his farmhouse?
Are things that began like that all finished? Terror that comes at night time and leaves the victim dead? Is that over everywhere in the world?
And on the end, the other side from Göring, is Wilhelm Keitel, Field Marshal, Chief of the German High Command. Keitel was, he said, a soldier who carried out his orders. The orders said, make aggressive war against the world. And Wilhelm Keitel carried them out in his fashion. His was the crowning conspiracy. Down the chain of command went new orders for new techniques for overrunning land and destroying life. And Wilhelm Keitel asked, when the verdict of death by hanging was handed down, that he be shot, that he receive the honorable death of a soldier. We honored him by hanging him. Why? There are many answers, but one will do.
Our prayers had been answered. Their soldiers were coming, but their guns had been aimed beyond our town, and our buildings were still standing. We were in the woods, watching close by, when they came fast in their tanks and trucks, and they were speeding ahead, most of them. Maybe. We looked at each other with hope. The last group stopped suddenly in the square. And in an hour, there was not one home or one shop, not even a barn that was not burning to the ground. And then they came for us, beating in the woods like for animals, rounding up our people one by one, dragging them to vans, loading them in, driving away. They did not find me. Later, I saw the flames die down. I alone. And there was no town, and there never will be. About the people, my family and my neighbors, I will never know. Ashes, everything. Ashes, everybody.
These were the new techniques of aggression. And when they showed the movies at Nuremberg of the floggings of prisoners of war, of burning of innocent civilians the German armies had captured, and the rape of homes and farms and churches. Keitel sat with his arms folded. His own orders were not news to him. And when the showing was over, he whispered something to Schacht, and then he laughed. Wilhelm Keitel, we hanged you. For these things, we built a gallows for you.
I kept asking those questions. Did they really die? All they stood for. You see, I've got a natural right to ask. I fought my way into Nuremberg. Without me, they wouldn't have got theirs this morning. But as those traps were sprung, I kept seeing something. Not something I imagined, but something real. Real as a German 88 to me, anyway. An empty noose still waiting for its final victim. Waiting to choke off the last breath of the foulest thing we'll ever know. Fascism. That. Did that thing die? I don't know. But I don't think so. What I'm thinking of is the beginnings of that thing. The signs that people can see in the world outside, and if they look deep enough, within themselves. In Germany, there were those beginnings, and they were laughed at, or they weren't recognized, or fought against. Sometimes we don't want to see them. We brush them off, call them just harmless. Still, that empty noose keeps coming back when I think of a guy like Joe up the block, a union man, Joe, going on 50. For all I know, he's a Republican. I don't know, Joe says to me the other day. Guess what they're calling me now? A Red. That's right, me, Joseph Nelson. Joe Nelson's no Red. But that's not the point. The point is, somebody's out to smash his union, so all the Joe Nelsons all of a sudden are Red. Is a thing like that dead? Can you call it dead? Or isn't it maybe one of those small beginnings? A sign pointing up the road to bigger things? They died. But still, I can't help seeing that empty noose when I think of something like this, too. A vet, just out of the Army a few hours, was grabbed off a bus, and his eyes were gouged with a club until he was blind. Had to get out of uniform to lose his sight. Different skin, sure. Did that idea really get snuffed out at Nuremberg? Maybe there are little offshoots coming back, scattered, separated. Are they beginnings that will stay beginnings, or peter out, or maybe grow? Or a thing like the other night. The Jews having their high holidays, Rosh Hashanah they call it. And what happens? Some kids throw bricks through the synagogue window and paint "Kill the Kikes" on the sidewalks outside. A couple of weeks ago, not far from here. The idea dead? How many times do you hear things like, "Never hire a nigger, can't trust him, and he's just a lazy spick," or "Get out of here, you sheeny." Takes his orders from the Pope. Dago, squarehead, bullhunk. Everyday talk, isn't it? Everyday beginnings, maybe? I get a handbill from an organization shouting, "This country belongs to white Protestants only. Nobody else deserves anything. No rights, no nothing. Get the scum out of here and keep them down where they belong." That kind of thing still waits to be hanged. It's still on the hangman's agenda. And what about the beginnings of war? Not in the exchanges of notes between diplomats, but in men's minds, the trigger-happy minds. Is everybody for a way of finding peace today? Or are there men walking around, men like a fellow I was listening to coming in on a train from Detroit, complaining? Well, what's the matter with us anyway? Biggest, strongest country there is left. And all those pineapples piling up at Oak Ridge, What are we messing around with treaties and conferences for? Why all the talking? Why not some action? Maybe we didn't quite hang that one, did we? Sprouting again so soon after we finished the last one. But let's get one thing straight here. Don't get the idea I'm talking about America. I'm not. I mean everywhere in the world about these things, these beginnings. Everywhere people are getting kicked around. Seeds all over and being watered. I only talk about America because I know my country best and love it best. And I've got to see those things snuffed out here. The way I see it, that little part of all of us that's only a seed, the tiny part that hates another fellow for his race or religion, that whispers of war and is tempted to get the quick solution whether it means violence or not, that little part of every one of us should have died with them at Nuremberg. So, what did we do at Nuremberg? We stuck up a big sign and said, try this again and the same thing will happen. We've established a new code among human beings. Every crime that contributes to aggression is a crime against humanity. Yes, we said that. And it's something new and something we can be proud of. That's number one. Then, number two, the big four, Britain, France, Russia, and us got together on this thing. That's right, we agreed. First time since the war ended, we agreed on hanging the 11 of them. It shows we can agree on things. There are ways, and we can find them. Now, what didn't we do at Nuremberg? Well, that empty noose is still swinging, and it's still empty. Until it's used, until it has choked the life out of fascism, so far as I'm concerned, this is no time, no place. There is no reason to sit back relieved and calm. Tonight at Nuremberg, and tomorrow, there will still be one round coil of rope ready to be used. It's going to take a lot of self-examining, a lot of faith in what we believe in, a lot of willingness to fight for it, a lot of speaking out for all of us here and everywhere before that empty noose is filled, and we can stand up and say we have won. We have conquered. I think we can do it.
This has been a special broadcast presented by Columbia and its affiliated stations about the events that took place today at Nuremberg. Martin Wolfson and Will Hare were narrators. The Empty Noose was written by Arnold Perl, directed by John Becker, with a musical score composed and conducted by Robert Stringer.
Ellery Queen, usually presented at this time over many of these stations by the makers of Anison and Kolinos, was not broadcast tonight due to the special program you have just heard. Tune in for Ellery Queen next Wednesday at the regularly scheduled time. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.